So we're sitting here with the great Adam Holzman, known keyboardist for many decades, Miles Davis fame, and if I may say that, go-to sideman for many people, and also recording artist in his own right. And currently is on tour with the prog rock musician Steven Wilson. So hello Adam.
Hi, how are you?
And how's the tour been going so far? The second leg it is right now, right?
It's been a great tour. It's been a great summer tour. We've played some really beautiful venues, a lot of outdoor concerts, but the weather has been amazing for every gig until this one. It looks like it might rain today, but it's been really very nice, very nice. We played in an ancient amphitheater in Verona, Teatro Romano, and Teatro Romano, and a few other, like some French castles, and again, the weather's been great, and the gigs have been great, so it's been a particularly nice tour. It's a very nice summer tour.
Very good. So I looked at your tour schedule the other day, and it seems pretty grueling. You just told me you returned from Dresden the other night, and now, as you said, Italy, France, and a lot of going back and forth too, geographically, I suppose.
There's some zigzagging around. We're slowly working our way further east. We're going to Istanbul in a few days.
Okay. So how do you manage to keep sane doing that much traveling?
We do a lot of traveling, and I think that if we were flying or trying to catch trains everywhere, we would be insane for sure. But we travel. The organization is very together, and we travel on a very nice tour bus. And it's actually fairly easy for us. You just get on the bus after the gig and fall asleep in your bunk, and you wake up the next day in the next town you're playing. So in some ways it's the best of both worlds. You sleep while you travel. Traveling is the worst part of touring, and if you can do that while you're sleeping, it's not so bad. So a tour bus makes a huge difference. This kind of a schedule would almost be impossible for anyone doing it with commercial flights or trains or something like that.
Okay, so that answered much of my next questions, because I was going to ask if you have like 2, 3 or even 4 dates in a row sometimes. Do you sleep in hotels at all, or always on the tour bus? And like maybe people outside would like to know, I mean, can you shower in the tour bus, or do you shower at the venue?
We have we shower at the venues, okay. But we have hotels all the time.
Okay.
It's just when we're doing 2 or 3 gigs in a row, the crew has to set up starting at 10 o'clock in the morning. So there's no way we can travel the next day. But if you want to schedule like 3 or 4 concerts in a row, back to back, which makes more sense financially, then you got to figure out a way to get everyone to the gig in the morning of the gig. So, what was the question again?
Just the logistics. When you have 2 or 3 dates in a row.
Right. So what will happen is we'll do 2 or 3 dates in a row, and then we'll have a day off, and we'll stay in a nice hotel, and that's very nice. Okay. And the venues always have showers. I used to always wonder why dressing rooms had showers a long time ago. Now I understand why. But yeah, it's no. We definitely have. It's not so crazy like that. I think there's some bands that do that, but we don't do that. We're civilized, a little bit anyway.
Okay. So talking about playing with Steven Wilson, what makes this gig different from other gigs you have done so far? Like, for one thing, in the studio, like what can you bring to the table in the studio, and what can you bring to the table live on stage?
Okay, so you're asking me 2 questions. The first question is what makes this gig different for me from other gigs, yeah. And several things. He's playing to I played. How can I say this? When I was touring with artists like Miles Davis and Grover Washington and Chaka Khan, they had a large audience built in. A lot of the audience was a mix of young and old, because those artists were legacy artists and everyone liked them. With Stephen, it's the first time I've played to audiences on a large scale that are younger and more rock oriented. So that's a big difference for me. Also, musically, this gig, even though it is, how can we say, a lot of the music is very much planned out, I still have opportunities in the context of Stephen's band to reach into all my different backgrounds, electronic music, piano stuff, creating soundscapes and a sound design kind of effects, soloing on a synthesizer or on electric piano. I mean, all these different roles that I have the opportunity to play in one context. So that's one of the things that's very cool. Plus, I love the music. I was a fan before I even joined the band. I was a fan of Porcupine Tree and stuff. So I really like it, you know, where Stephen is coming from also. So it's a great opportunity. Another thing, I'd say one of the most profound things that's different about this gig than about the past gigs I've done is that when I toured with someone like Miles or Grover Washington, again, those were legacy artists, and they were already looking back on their career and sort of doing the best of their career for the set list. Stephen, I'm working with an artist who's in the prime of his career right now, and it's great to be a part of something that is happening now and not something that is a celebration of a much longer period. I prefer being in the present. It's a great opportunity.
I remember once you posted on Facebook that you practiced before rehearsals. It was a while ago, maybe.
Oh, actually, you know what? There's another part of your question before we didn't answer, which was what I bring to the table.
Mm-hmm.
Stephen's music. In the case of Stephen's music, let's start again. In the case of Stephen's music, most of the keyboard parts are already written by Stephen, and a lot of the piano parts are what he already has, and a lot of times those piano parts serve the song perfectly, and sometimes I've tried to change them or jazz them up a little bit. It doesn't really work. I got to stick with the more basic to the bone structure of the pieces, because that's really what the song is all about. At the same time, especially on a gig, there's a lot of little small parts in the music where I can do different things, and so from night to night I try to change it and bring in a little bit more of a jazz mentality, so parts are not always the same every night, solos are not always the same, sometimes even background things I try to change a little bit, but still within the structure of the song. So in the studio, it's a little bit different. I mean, I make suggestions and stuff, but we're mostly serving Stephen's vision in the studio. But on stage, take a few more liberties. Anyway, what's your next question?
Yeah, the question
about practicing for practicing.
Exactly, because like the hobbyist musician may think, well, a guy like you, does he even have to practice, you know, or like even when he's touring, you know?
Well, you always have to practice. First of all, you always have to practice. You always have to stay in shape. It's like being an athlete. You have to stay in shape. So there's the mechanical, physical side of it. Also, there's the mental side. When we rehearse, everyone is expected to know the music, not to be in the process of learning it. We don't waste any time in rehearsal. Steve counts off a song that we've all supposedly learned at home, and we play it. Now, it might be rough, and there might be issues that we have to figure out, or certain things we don't have completely together yet, but for the most part, the song is there from the beginning, and that's because we all do our homework. So any good band, you have to do your homework before you even show up to rehearsal. So I make a joke about it, saying rehearsing for rehearsing or practicing for practicing, but it's just a matter of what any good musician would do, which is prepare for the situation and walk in and know your stuff. I mean, what a band leader wants is to not have to worry about whether you got the music together or not. That's number one, is they don't want to worry. So show up and just at least know the stuff. And maybe you're working on details or whatever, but you know, I think it's it depends on the gig too. If it's a more of a freewheeling improvisational kind of thing, then maybe a good idea is to not practice, but to think about it, or to listen to it maybe. You don't practice for improvisation in quite the same way, but you still have to keep your chops up. It's all connected in different ways.
Let me get back for a second about what you mentioned earlier, like the solo spots. You'll be able to jazz up some things within a Steven Wilson concert.
Right.
And there's a famous quote by was it Brandon? No, who was it? The sax player for Sting, Branford Marsalis.
Branford Marsalis, yeah.
And he said, and I was gonna ask your take on this. He said, in jazz you are given the time to develop a solo within a tune, like in sort of an arc of suspense.
Yeah, and
in rock, it has to be there on the spot.
You got to basically jump to the last third of your solo. What would be in the jazz? That's absolutely true. And that's a good point. It's for the musician. Of course, it's more fun. I don't know if fun is the right word, but sometimes makes more sense musically to get there slowly or not immediately. But I mean, I completely understand and can relate to the idea, the more rock idea of jumping in and already have, you know, all guns blazing. That's what you have to do for a rock solo. Usually you only have, you know, 16, if you're lucky, 16, 24 bars, and you got to jump in there and you got to make it exciting. And if the song is unfolding slowly over time, that's a different story. But I agree completely with Branford on that particular point.
I would like to talk for a second about your keyboard setup. It is on YouTube. You did a few videos for Korg, I believe, and other things. But I just wanted to ask. To me, it looks very similar, or even the same as on the last Steven Wilson tour. Or are there any major changes? It was like Hammond coming from an XM module.
That was the only major change, and that started in 2012. And I've done a few things, but no, I've purposely kept it simple. And there haven't been very many major changes. I used to have some custom-built wooden keyboard stands, which were very cool. But then, I remember Steven used to have like a little desk area for his keyboard on stage, and we had some other sort of like old-fashioned furniture kind of look on the stage. And now they changed the look of the stage to something more modern and like metal stands and stuff like that. So what's different this year is I don't have my custom cool wooden stand. I'm just using basic metal stands. But it's a more slick look, which is nice. And but getting back to the setup, I mean, the setup my setup is planned very logically in a way where I really don't need to bring a ton of stuff to do what I need to do for this gig. I am using 3 keyboards, so I have the Korg SV1 covers all the piano stuff. I have a Hammond module which is dedicated for organ sounds. Most of the other Mellotron sounds and things like that are coming from my laptop, and plus I have the Moog. So I have basically in my, what I like to call a member of each of the main keyboard families: organ, piano, polyphonic synthesizer, which is the laptop, and analog synthesizer, which is the Moog. And if you have all 4 of those, you've got it covered. The rest of it becomes then a bunch of you know, staging with multiple keyboards and things like that. I wouldn't mind having another synthesizer, maybe a modular or something that only makes strange noises that I can add to things. But for covering all the basic parts for this gig, and I would venture to say probably for most gigs, this sort of basic setup that I have, I think, does the trick.
And so for the strange sound, as you put it, you use your pedals, right?
I use pedals, and I have some things programmed in the Moog, but it would be nice to have something modular where you can get certain kinds of textures that you can't get on anything else. You know, and we do some ambient textures in some of the songs. So it would be nice to be able to have more options in those sections. And that's what if I could ever bring a fourth keyboard along, it would be something like that, some kind of truly bizarre synthesizer. But you know, space in the truck is tight, etc., etc. I wanted to bring a keyboard with my Hammond module, and they said no, so I programmed it in with the laptop. It actually worked out better that way in the long run, but you know, we have other limitations.
It has changed to that type of setup for many keyboardists. I feel, I don't know, maybe the only one I can recall at the moment is maybe it's like Geoff Downs from ES. He still has like 12 keyboards around him or something. I don't know, but
that's showbiz.
Yeah, that's
showbiz. And the thing is, you know, there's nothing wrong with having multiple keyboards. Back in the day, you needed it because you couldn't do the pre-programmed stuff. If you wanted to have all these sounds at your fingertips, you couldn't just press a button and have it. You had to. The easiest way to do that would be to have a large keyboard set of multiple keyboards. Now it's not really so necessary. I mean, you know, a band like Yes is part of the tradition of having a big keyboard setup, and I think that's cool. You know, for old time's sake, and I'm sure there are some uses for that kind of a thing. But I've just never had the luxury of even contemplating traveling with a setup like that, so I don't have too many more thoughts on it.
Okay, so. Now I would like to talk about your new solo release, Truth Decay. I have a copy here. I will.
You do have a copy, right?
Pull it out later, yeah. And
oh, my book too.
Show it a bit. Yeah, I will get to that in a second.
Right.
Yeah. And so first thing that came to my mind, it was not sponsored by the U.S. Dental Association, was it?
The U.S. what? The U.S.
Dental Association, you know, because
no.
Truth Decay, Tooth Decay.
Yeah. Well, no, that's the joke, the pun, but no, nothing to do with the Dental Association. Has everything to do with, well, a lot of the political and social issues.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I wanted to try and address, even though the record is mostly instrumental.
I remember that on your solo album before that, Brave New World, you had some pretty cool collaborations, and on this one too, right? So do you want to talk about
this one? Well, this one is actually the first record I've done that has many collaborations. Most of my regular band albums have been with my working group, Brave New World. This one, I decided to do a mix of the guys in my band, and since I have all these new friends now with Steven's group and other project that I do with some guys in Italy, other connections with the experimental music festival that I do every year in Austria called Outreach. There's a number of things that I'm doing on a regular basis that I wanted to represent in the record. And I also feel, that said, that even though there's a variance in styles between some of the songs, and the album covers a rather big range of styles, that I think it all hangs together. You know, I think it doesn't sound too schizophrenic, you know, which is one of the things. Anyway, so it's a nice mix. Some of the guys from Steven's band are on it, some of the guys from my regular Brave New World group. I have 2 vocal songs on there, which is unique for me. Nick Beggs wrote the lyrics and sang the title track, which is about basically the problem today in the political climate, where to quote the first line of the song, if you say something loud enough, someone will believe it. And the idea that science can be debated or doubted. You know, these guys that are running around being science deniers and still flying on airplanes and using cell phones is pretty hilarious to me, you know. So that's all wrapped up in the idea of Truth Decay. I have another vocal song on there, which is a cover of a song by the 60s rock group Love. And it's also, I think, very pertinent to the general sign of the times today. It's talking about, of course, the Vietnam War, but there's a lot of parallels in that song to what's happening now. And Randy McStein sang the lead vocals on that one. My father signed Love to Elektra Records back in the 60s, and it's a little bit of an homage to that part of my life, and also it's a great song. I think that a lot of people are checking that band out now. They had a different kind of edge to them than a lot of the other 60s bands. So that was something I wanted to do. But also, the record features a lot of just flat-out jazz rock burning, which is something that I've always tried to keep some element in most of my music. Anyway, blah, blah, blah.
So, it's very insightful, very interesting. And I was going to ask you, just returned from a solo gig in Amsterdam. So how do you go about this, like this change of pace during a tour with Steven Wilson?
Yeah, it's fun to do. I don't have the opportunity to do it very often, but what originally had happened was there was a week gap in the middle of this summer tour, and the plan was for most of the guys to go back to England, and I was going to stay in Europe for a week because it still is not enough time to fly home and fly back, and I really didn't want to do that. So I arranged some other little projects. One is a project I have called H3, which is with this guitar player from Austria called Roland Hines. And it's more of a Euro jazz kind of thing where I play Fender Rhodes and keyboard bass with the Moog, and he plays a little bit sort of in the style of John Abercrombie or Ralph Towner, and we have drummer. It's a really cool group. And then I called my friend Arnie in in Amsterdam, who was able to arrange a solo piano concert for me. So I arranged these things, and then as soon as I had them all arranged, a gig happened on the same day as my solo piano concert, so they had to push it back. So what ended up happening is instead of just killing a week on a tour and a break, I ended up having to squeeze in these gigs when we had 2 and 3 days off instead, and running around Europe a little bit crazy. But I love the challenge and the change. I love being able to do solo piano or a free jazz kind of gig and then come right back and do this kind of music with Steven. It's for me it's a lot of fun, and the more different things you do, the more it informs the other things that you do, and everything gets a little better, a little stronger.
And in Amsterdam, for instance, did you play songs from your new album? Did you arrange them for solo? Or?
I did a lot of improvisation, but I did play one song. I played a solo piano version of Bella Capri, the second song, very much of a piano-ish kind of thing, and I did a mix of some jazz standards, a couple of Steven Wilson songs, some originals, some improvisations, a couple of old standards, but mostly new one. You know, things like Ralph's Piano Waltz by John Abercrombie, or Pyramid Song by Radiohead, and then some older things like Nardis and Flamenco Sketches and things like that. So a mix of old and new, and some improv and some arranged.
Okay, great. So you have to get ready for sound check very soon. So my last question.
Let's see. Oh yeah, we got time. We got time for one more question.
Okay.
Yeah.
My last question would just be, like, for all the fans out there, if you would like to tell a little bit how it was playing with Miles Davis.
Wow. Okay. Let me think about that. Well, a gig like that changes your life. Changes your life musically, and also if you have your shit together on any level, it'll change your life professionally. So it opened up a lot of doors for me. But more than that, it opened up a lot of ideas. And the things he pushed me to do, I don't know if I would have normally gravitated towards that, but then it finally helped me make some connections and breakthroughs on my own. He was really interested in the idea of what synthesizers could do. And that was why he hired me, because he wanted to have a guy in his band that knew how to program sounds, but also could be creative with them. and you know, I think that also was intrigued with things that were new. And when I joined his band, it was right at the time where synthesizers were actually starting to sound really good. At this point, Oberheim had come out, PPG Wave, Fairlight DX7, of course there were still Moogs and things like that around. So there's a lot of sound colors to choose from at that point. It wasn't just a limited selection of things he could do. And he wanted that sort of Gil Evans kind of dramatic range, but with a small group. He was able to do that with synthesizers. I was, long story short, I'll make the quick version of the story. I was doing some synthesizer programming and playing for an R&B artist named Randy Hall. And Randy was friends with Miles and had worked with Miles, and he was the guy that sang the title song of Man with the Horn. And so Miles was interested in getting into more of a pop format on with the album that eventually turned into Tutu. And so he called Randy, and Randy brought me into the session, and he wanted to do a session with Randy, and they arranged a song for him. And Miles liked what I did at the session. And within 3 days, I was on tour with Miles and his band in Europe. It was an unbelievable, like, fantasy story. But anyway, I'm very lucky that happened to me.
Very good. So to end this, and I would like to show everybody your CD and your book, maybe.
Okay, yes, sure.
So people get the idea, and that's highly recommended. So I hope we can sit down for a second like this. Yeah. So this is your book that sketches about, you know...
Yes, it's comics about being on the road, life on the road, and other things, but mostly life on the road.
Okay, and
it's available on Amazon. Things that aren't that big a deal, but still bug the shit out.
Very easily obtainable. I did on Amazon in Germany. No problem.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Adam.
Okay. And I appreciate the interview. Hello, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you very much.